God bless you once again. We are here. We were able to inform you something very, very important. In the last episode, we were able to put together here concerning the return of Israel. And today we want to split these returns one after the other. But today we want to talk about the national return of Israel. That is Israel returning as a nation. And there is another one too, Israel returning as a religious nation. And the third one, Israel returning as a spiritual nation. So these three phases are phases of the returns of Israel. But we are going to pick up the first one, which is Israel returning as a nation. But before that, you should be able to know what Jesus said in the book of Matthew chapter 24. He just finished from the temple and he came down. And then the disciples came to him and said, Oga, look at how massive this temple is. And he looked at them and said, look, do not praise this very temple, because very soon this temple will come down. A stone will not be left against the other. And then the disciple came to him and they asked the question. He said, when will this be? What shall be the sign of thy coming? And what shall be the end of the world? Three questions. And Jesus took time to look at these their questions and address the question. But one of the times he mentioned was the time when the temple will be destroyed. And that was actually what he said, right from the book of Matthew chapter 24, from verse 22. He said, this very temple you see, very soon will come down. And when it happens, you will see an abomination that causes desolation. And then that one that was prophesied by Daniel. And he said, if any of you is on the field, don't come to the house. Those of you on the rooftop, don't come down. And then those who are having pregnancy and having children, Jesus pitied them, because it will be a time of serious trouble. This very prophecy was actually fulfilled in AD 70. In AD 70, the Jews had a little problem with the Romans. It was a kind of insurrection. And there was a decision by the Roman government to actually destroy the Jewish people. And they were able to send a general known as Titus. Titus came there and fought against the children of Israel, killed a lot of them, and that was the beginning of the diaspora. The diaspora simply means the exodus of the Jews from their own land after the death and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. They were devastated and they were removed completely from their land. But one of the significant things that happened was that the Jews were able to lose their spiritual focus and their religious focus, because the temple was destroyed as Jesus prophesied. The temple came down to the extent that no stone was left against the other. In fact, the foundation of the temple was dug to the extent that people wanted to take the gold. The Bible said the temple was built with precious stones. Precious stones were used to lay the foundation of the temple. And so those who destroyed the temple, the Romans, actually needed those stones. So they dug the foundation and they removed everything there, to the extent that the prophecy of Jesus Christ came to pass, which was a prophecy that said that no stone will be left upon the other. And that was how the Jewish community were all removed from the entire Israel. Remnant remained, but they were very insignificant. The Jews ran into Roman territory, Europe, part of Asia, Africa, they were all scattered, AD 70. And that was how they were until when the time God decided that they should come back. But what happened was that when the Romans were able to pursue the Jews from their land, they colonized the entire Palestine. In fact, it was the Romans, in order to colonize the place, gave it the name Palestine. And they were able to colonize the place until, after many years, that place was given to them by war. And that was how Israel were all removed from their own land. But you know what happened? It didn't stop there. Israelites fell into the hands of different kinds of people, different kinds of empire, and they started living that way. And by the year 1517, there was an empire that ruled that very region, known as Ottoman Empire. Ottoman Empire remained in power until 500 years. They were able to leave Palestine in the year 1917. That was after the First World War. And they were able to live there. And that was how that place became a region of dispute. And what happened? When they left that region, the Jews, who were actually very much obsessed to go back to their land because of persecutions, there was anti-Semitism in Ottoman Empire. And a lot of them were killed. They were all killed all over the world. They were killing them. And so as a result of that, there was a movement by the Jews called the Zionism movement. The movement was the movement of actualization of the national Israel. And this movement was gaining recognition because it was so intense that people began to rush back to the Palestine. The Jews all over the world began to go back on their own splinter, not as a nation. But people began to say, okay, if we cannot have rest in Germany, if we cannot have rest in the Arab world, if we cannot have rest in Africa, it is better we go back to where we belong. And they began to go one by one, led by one Zionist leader or the other. And that was how the Jews began to come down. But even while they were coming there, they were not able to have a nation because they are not able to form a nation. And so, after the Second World War, the First World War, there was what they call the Treaty of Avers. The Treaty of Avers was a treaty that ceded that part of the region to Britain. It ceded that part of the region to Britain and asked the British Empire or the British government to be able to actualize the Balfour Declaration. And what was the Balfour Declaration? Balfour Declaration was a declaration that Israelites should have a nation in Palestine. And for over how many years, the British were not able to complete this very assignment. And so, around that time, 1948, they started to go into withdrawal. And that was what led the United Nations to form a committee they called the UNSCOP. UNSCOP simply means the United Nations Special Committee on Palestine. And that very committee came up with two great resolutions. Number one, the resolution is that there should be a two-state formation. That is Israelites and the Palestinians, or the Arab. They were not called Palestinians, they were called the Arabs. And then two, that Bethlehem and Jerusalem should be under international control. The Jews accepted, but the Arabs refused to accept. And that was how Israelites were able to begin to have hope in Israel. And so, in that very resolution, there was a vote. 33 members of the House voted for that very resolution. 13 voted against it, while 10 did not vote at all. So the majority carried the vote that the nation of Israel had been formed. And by the grace of God, that nation is there today. Even if the Jew, the Arab, refused to recognize the nation of Israel, the nation of Israel was not only meant to be recognized by man, because God already has given them a nation. They only came back to their land where they ran away. But even at that, there was an international recognition that Israel was a state. And it's a state till today. And of course, when they refused, the British actually moved out of Palestine. And a Zionist leader known as David Ben-Gurion, was the one who declared the state of Israel on 14th of May, 1948. And that was how Israel today became a nation. And that nation is just 77 years, as young as it is, but it's older than 5,000 years. And today, men are not yet able to recognize the fact that Israel is a nation. The Arab world, the Palestinians, the Iranians, all over around them, Syrians, Lebanese, the Yemen, they are not able to recognize that Israel is a nation. But the truth is that it's a nation. The only thing you have to do is to accept it. And even if you don't accept it from the human point of view, God is the one who gave them the nation. So today, Israel is a nation in their own land. And that is why you should be able to know Israel has come back, like what the Bible says in the book of Ezekiel chapter 37. If you read from 22 downwards, you will hear when God said, I'm going to pick you from all the nations where I scattered you, and I will bring you together and will make you a people. And God fulfilled it in 1948. And even while in the 1948 that these people refused to accept, few days and few years after that, they came to come and destroy the nation. But God was with them. And that's why up to today, Israel is still staying there. A small nation in the midst of big enemies. But they were staying. Why? Because it is legal. 2, because it is spiritual. 3, because it is divine. Israel can never be removed. Whatever a man will do, let him do. The greater part of Israel is coming in the future. And it's going to be a devastating issue before the world. And I want everybody here to prepare himself. Because whatever you are seeing in the Middle East can never be changed. In fact, it will get on worse and worse and worse. So that an average child of God should begin to buckle up. Because our salvation is nearer than when we believe. This is the political and national return of Israel. We shall deal with the spiritual return with the religious return of Israel in our next episode. God bless you and remain blessed.